You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Let's go. Let's go. Are you ready?
I think so.
You're in the midst of doing things to that phone of yours.
I am. I haven't done anything on the phone today. And so I was trying to all of a sudden there was...
Could you have even imagined? I don't think anybody, maybe there was some person that imagined,
my hands are dry.
like Tesla or something, that imagined that we'd all be using these little computers in our pockets for everything one day.
Did I imagine computer pockets?
Obviously you didn't. I mean,
pocket computers?
pocket
I
computers.
didn't. I have to get, it's fine. Keep going.
What'd you forget?
I cannot have, I need lotion.
Oh.
I know you hate it, but.
I don't hate your lotion.
Also, they are so dry. It is, it's just painful. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
a
going to
thing.
sit here. No, I didn't notice till I slowed down to record, so chances are I would be fine.
But now you noticed.
Now I noticed.
Yeah, that's okay. So we have switched up our recording schedule. I don't know if
Yes.
it's obvious to the people watching.
Do you
If
think
you're
they can
listening,
tell?
I'm sure they can tell. I can tell. Well, obviously it's obvious to
Of course
tell.
you can tell. Well, I don't know. Unless you're really looking at
Oh no, there's a big
the
difference.
backdrop. Is there a big difference?
Yeah, it's big enough that I have to fix it. Otherwise, it's going to drive me bonkers.
Uh-oh.
And
Is it Super HD again? Do I because I did not put forth the effort required for Super HD illuminated.
we always record in Super HD.
Yeah, that's right. I don't like it anymore. No, I thought you changed it because there was the one that was
Do we want to get into the technical resolution talk of our video quality?
I'm pretty sure you brought it up.
I brought it up in regards to lighting and how obvious it is. Anywho,
Way different
Folks.
than video quality of the lighting.
we have switched up our recording schedule. We used to record in the evenings, and now we're recording in the mornings in an effort to kind of capitalize on the energy of the day and being more with it.
Welcome. Is this the first morning one? This is it.
It's
For
not.
a long time.
It's not, well, technically,
Since we switched to mornings.
yeah.
Since we decided that this is now...
Yes, this is the
this
first
almost
morning.
spilled out yesterday.
The candle.
Yeah. I was like, is it going to go? And I was going to let it go because it was going to be so pretty to watch it waterfall out.
Yeah.
It almost did. It was a
Are you
super
worried
long-
about it spilling out?
I'm worried about missing it.
I think we'll probably need to get another coaster for it. So then that way we can just donate the coaster to it rather than... Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Okay, folks. So we are recording during the morning.
I
Hence the French press coffee and the tea. Oh, this coffee looks so good.
It does look good.
Oh, I forgot the mushrooms in it. Oh, well.
Do you want me to go get your mushrooms?
I do not.
Okay.
And
Coffee for you, tea for me.
there's so many episodes that I want to do now. So much stuff is coming up for us.
Okay. Well,
There's
good,
so many
'cause
different things that
that'll be helpful.
we're learning, so many different new awarenesses, so many depths of things, right? This episode is 297 or 8. I think this is actually 8.
Yeah.
And
I don't like this lotion at all.
so by the time this episode comes out, it will have already been the 12th, April 12th, because April 12th is next week.
It will already be.
We'll talk about that on the live tomorrow.
Okay.
Anywho, that was a big day.
Right?
We expect it to be a big day. That's the only thing that I don't like about recording in advance is that it's kind of hard to talk about stuff.
It's hard to talk about what happened in the future
Yeah, and also
as
Talking.
it was in the past.
because by the time we talk about what happened on the 12th,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be May. And so
Yeah.
it just is what it is.
It's okay though.
It is okay.
Right.
I'm not upset.
And the thing is that a lot of it, while the magic is just a little sneak peek with that, the magic is already happening. It's just the exact conjunction is on the 12th. But it's already been building up.
What
for
is
weeks.
conjuncting
Conjunction
again?
is when they're touching.
I know,
When
but
they're-
what is conjuncting?
Conjunction is when they're together.
Not what planets are.
Oh, I'm I don't know how I can say this different.
I don't need the definition again, Webster. I need to know what is actually conjuncting.
Neptune and Jupiter.
Neptune and Jupiter?
Neptune and Jupiter.
Okay. Thank you, Webster.
And Pisces. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. I am like, I'm going to steal your coffee. I didn't even choose to drink coffee. I'm feeling like, I can't. You are pushing my fiery buttons today. I'm fiery. He knows I'm fiery.
I was
the
thinking,
moon is coming, and he's like,
oh my goodness. Is that like winter is coming?
It is, exactly.
I
like
miss
that.
Game of Thrones.
Do you? Well, you can start watching it again. You might have some time on your hands. Okay,
That was a little
extra
sass.
That was a little extra.
I think next month we should.
I like to pull that one back in a little bit.
I think next month we should start talking about all this stuff with the moon that we're doing and learning and recognizing, and yeah, I think we should get like a month under our belt. That'll make us a professional.
You
right?
talk like you already
expert.
are. You do. I want to finish my one thought. That I was talking about Neptune and Jupiter,
yes,
which are the ones that are conjunct in Pisces.
Coming in hot.
We're already experiencing that. So when you're listening to this and it's already happened, or when we talk about it, it's already May, it's the magic that is going to happen. You might see it actualized right there. But there's times that it's like it's not going to be known just yet. Like the actualization doesn't come till later. They're still processing. Or you do have that awareness of that actualizing, but it's still building momentum. The word is spreading. It's still, so it'll be okay that we're talking about it later as we're talking about it before when it comes out late, like all of that, because it's just like this beautiful like intertwinedness.
Yes.
So I think that one will be okay.
I agree. All those things are true.
Yeah. Thank you for validating me.
So it will be okay.
Yeah.
This episode of the podcast, there's my intro voice.
Yeah.
Did you know that you had a good radio voice? Get that mic up in the proper position there, baby. You ain't talking from your neck. Did you know that you have
I don't know why you think I'm being extra sassy this morning on my own without inspiration.
I know. I'm well aware of the...
It's like you poke the bear and then the bear growls and you're like, oh, whoa.
You're picking up what I'm laying
Where
down.
did that come from?
Yeah, I'm well aware of it.
Wasn't that a little bit of a, like, that was a little overzealous grr coming from you?
I got you covered, I know.
Okay.
What was I saying? I was saying something.
Radio voice. You were using your radio voice.
Yeah. Did you realize that we had radio voices?
I knew you did.
Okay. Did you realize that you did?
I'm still surprised when I hear it, but it makes me happy.
Does it?
Yeah. Because I feel like I sound like a dork. I got used to hearing my own voice because of our past life, but
yeah. That was such a different context.
Such a different context. But
do you remember how nervous you were to talk on the radio back in the day?
I do.
In our past life?
I do.
I remember how, like, oh my
Were you
goodness,
nervous?
So nervous.
Yeah.
So nervous. Like, that's one of the hardest, not one of the hardest things. There's lots of hard things about being a cop, but for me.
Or dispatcher.
That was one of the things that was like so nerve wracking.
Yeah.
Because you think like you're going to key up at the wrong time. And
you will.
Everybody speaks so fluently on the radio. And when you're new and you don't speak that well, just about anything, to try to get on a radio and say something to where not only everybody can hear it, but it's important. And I remember when I first started, I had just the absolute best FTO. It's a field training officer. He was a senior officer at the time, and he eventually became my sergeant. And just loved him, just absolutely loved him. He was so sweet and so kind, and he had a much different energy than I had, which was frustrating at times, but definitely like exactly what I needed, right? He was very much like slow, and I was not that at all. So he did a really good job of balancing me out. But I remember he would literally be like, "This is what you're going to say." And I'm like, okay. I think I even
could
wrote
you remember
stuff
all that?
down
Yeah,
sometimes.
because like, this is what you're gonna say. If it's more than 3 words in activation, I'm lost.
Yeah, but it was literally like this, and I'm like, okay. Should I do it now? Yeah, do it now. Okay, what am I saying again? And then undoubtedly I'd mess it up, right?
Yeah.
You'd key up and you'd be like, and then you're like stuck there holding the mic and you don't know what to do, and then you have to like let go, and then you're like,
Sometimes letting go is hard. You just keep holding it, trying to get it out. And you're like, you can just let go. But you're like,
and then you sit there and just stutter. It was terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got through that.
I'm glad we did too. I think you're superhuman, I think.
You think I'm superhuman?
I think you're superhuman.
I just talked about how...
I know, because like that's the point. Is like, I didn't realize you went through that awkward phase. Because when you
weren't there for it. It was before you started working.
Barely.
Still.
Barely. Only a couple of months.
Yeah.
So, and you did not sound like a little rook.
But see, what you're forgetting.
I was also a rook?
No. I had that year of reserve.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I got a lot of practice during the reserve time.
Okay. Well, where's that? Because I was like, I just figured it was just like those things that other humans have to experience, but Craig just excels at because that's how. So, like, you had a hard time talking on the radio. That throws me.
Hard time, yeah.
Like, this is I never would have guessed it. I never would have guessed it. So again, I think.
So that's the beginning of your career, right?
I think you're superhuman.
And then you get to the point where, I mean, this is not an exaggeration, but you're in a pursuit. So a vehicle pursuit. It's called a 1080, and 1080 is just the 10 code for it. It's called different things other places, but I'm in a vehicle pursuit. So you're literally chasing somebody through traffic, and on top of like monitoring everything that's going on while you're trying to drive safely at high speeds with your lights and sirens on. There's all sorts of different things that you have to do as you like approach an intersection. You have to change the pitch of your siren. You have to do just a bunch of different things as you're observing and maintaining like safe travel as a police officer in a high speed pursuit, while the other person who is fleeing is doing whatever they want to do, right? And you still have to kind of do what you're supposed to and what you're responsible about doing. And I did all of those things really safely. And you do all of that. And oftentimes I would also be doing like not computer work. I wasn't like playing solitaire, but a license plate run, or if I knew who was in the vehicle, I would be searching warrants. I would have all of this other information that I would be trying to obtain because it influences the incident, right? If he's fleeing because he's got a felony warrant, then that tells me information that I need to know. And doing all of that while keying up on the radio. And it's not to say I was like smooth and calm and collected. Obviously stuff's happening, so you're activated, but you're just able to key up and get out information super, super fast in a very concise way. There's just such a stark difference to be like, should I say something now? Hello? Am I supposed to say, we don't say hello on the radio. Dang it. 1060. Oh no, wait, 10-4, copy. Oh shit. So it's a lot different.
Thinking, like dispatches aspect of it. See a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but what happens when when an officer is in a pursuit, they get their own channel. They don't have to switch. It's that channel just clears, dedicated to them. All other traffic.
Good dispatchers working, like you. Go ahead.
Interesting.
There'd be times where
policy,
where the channel definitely needed to be cleared, right?
Yeah.
And it was not.
Okay. Well, okay.
Somebody's getting written up.
I just I didn't.
Son of a bitch.
You okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for the disturbance.
No, I was just thinking about like how that goes. Like you get the channel cleared, and ideally, if there's enough dispatchers on, which rarely is the case, then you had a single dispatcher working that 1080, and then the other ones would take everything else.
Yeah. But
a lot of times, what would happen is there'd be two on. So while that is cleared, then you've got the other one handling, like the service channels, who's handling the fire, who's handling the other law, and taking all the calls. There's only so much one person can do. So if it's busy, then that one that's doing the 1080 also has to start other channels and calls, because there's just not enough to go around. Like we try. And I love it when you have like when officers, or they would hear something was going on and be like, oh, that's on that, and decide to keep like calling out stupid shit. Like, don't pull anybody over right now. Don't, like, are you going to stop on that barking dog? Thank you. Can you just like,
Yeah, that
So
was
it
the
was
best.
super, but I'm like, as I'm sitting here, I'm like getting into like all these intricacies of what took place. I had a realization. I never worked one of your 1080s.
Really?
You and I never had a 1080 together.
I didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't initiate a lot of 1080s,
Yeah.
meaning like I was the
Me
one
neither.
that started the traffic
I wasn't
stop.
like, you know what?
The only one that I can actually think of that I initiated was maybe two. I can't remember for sure. We chased some guy around in the middle of the night, and I can't remember if I started that one or if I just picked it up. That's not important. But yeah, I didn't start very many. But
Okay.
I
You
ended
didn't
up
start them, but you
being-
sure could finish them.
I was often the backup.
Yeah.
So that was I liked doing that.
Were you
job
ever the one that
better.
could go right behind the original, and instead of the
That was my-
pursuer,
Yeah.
you would be the one calling him
Yeah.
out for, because
That was my
I know,
favorite
again,
role.
ideally you wouldn't have to, the initial wouldn't have to do anything other than drive.
Exactly.
So you
That
would,
was my favorite.
well, I never heard you call them or pursue. Like
Yeah.
that just didn't happen when we were.
Yeah, so
You-
there's a thing like the guy that is in front actually chasing the other person. If he has somebody behind him, another officer, then all he's
Who can maintain
Exactly.
with him.
what he's doing is just responsible for chasing and pursuing, and the officer behind that officer is responsible for all the radio traffic, basically monitoring everything, updating everything, and basically relaying the information over the radio.
Like whether it's a
Right.
felony warrant or whether it's, is
Yeah.
it a
He's
stupid?
responsible for everything so that the lead officer can just focus on the driving portion of what's taking place. And I liked that role better.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was almost like you had to do more. The
Yeah.
driving part of just following somebody during a pursuit, it's fun, but it's like, it's not hard. It's just,
Yeah.
oh, we're going left. Okay, going left. Oh, you're doing 90. Okay, let's do, like, it's fun.
Yeah.
But the guy behind has to do way more stuff. So I liked that one. This actually came up when I was thinking about some of the techniques that I have to teach Asher. In my head, this came up. This isn't a conversation I had with Asher, but going through training to learn techniques and to learn the legal things that you had to learn, right, to drive a police vehicle. It's called EVO training, and you would train pursuit. You would train the 1080, and you would train both positions. You would train the officer that was following directly, and then the backup officer that was following the original officer. And I loved the backup officer
Yeah.
because the pursuit officer was the one that was like getting critiqued and getting tested and was like being monitored. And then they would just throw a bunch of cadets into the backup car, and you would take turns.
Oh, so you guys were just all
Oh my God.
having fun.
Oh yeah. And so when it was my turn, and they made you wait. So the pursuit would start, and they'd get, through the process of engaging, and then finally he's over the radio 1080, and then you're responding to help. So
Yeah.
there's always this delay.
So you got to make
Not
up.
with Craig.
Not with Craig.
15 seconds later, I was on his ass. We're just right there through all of it. And everybody in the back, because we're driving those old Crown Vics that have like huge springs.
It's like you're on a boat.
Oh,
so-
yeah. Just the boat floating around the track. And luckily we all had helmets on because your head just kept hitting the roof of the
Oh
car.
my God. It's awesome.
But, yeah.
Who got to be the fleer? Who got to play the role of that?
One of the training officers.
One of the training officers. I bet
Yeah.
that was fun.
It was like, because they did it in a very controlled way, which is obvious why, and
Yeah.
all those good things and stuff like that. But I'm like, this isn't a pursuit. Like, you're
Yeah.
not fleeing.
Yeah.
When it was my job to follow, I'm like, I was right there. I'm like,
Yeah.
50 miles an hour isn't going to get you away from me, bud. But of course, it's safety and all that.
I feel like they should do that better.
Well,
I think they should do a lot of things
there's
better.
some liability issues involved, but
We're only gonna, my hair. I remember like 1080s or like having those chases were the one of the scariest thing, because you don't get to go on law until you're at the end of your training or towards the end.
from the dispatch
You have
point
to.
of view.
They're gonna see. They don't. You've got a lot of You got a lot of tests to pass before they'll allow you on law.
Law's like
which
the
is
main
good.
channel, the channel that basically gets and receives all the traffic from officers out in the field. So yeah.
Like they're obviously the priority.
Guess
But I
this is
remember-
just like law enforcement chat for a minute. That's cool.
Hmm?
I'm sitting
Law-
like, yeah, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt. And I totally interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I was just like the shift of it. I remember how scared I was to get those. I was like panicked if I was going to get it. Like I didn't want to get them. The first couple that happened, just like that heart race, like you're pounding, like you're so scared. You're so scared to talk, to make sure you're typing it all. You know how hard it is to type when somebody's watching you type? And so it's like when you're just first starting and you get those, it's so critical that you're like everything is right and you're speaking it back, because you have to like parrot it back. When you get that, you're parroting it back so they know that you got it right. There's no corrections, because when you're out there, everybody has to know where to go. And it was so hard. It was so hard. It was so scary. I could still feel my like throat, like my heart in my throat, and how scary it was, and trying to not have your voice shake and trying to remember to breathe
Right.
and talk. And then it got to where it was like, you would almost get like, it's shitty. Like the truth of it is we get excited when one would happen. Cause like, oh, here we go. Now we're doing something. So the adrenaline, so it went from a fear base to, oh yeah, here we go. And then it was exciting. And like, how kind of messed up is that? I mean, it's not kind of messed up. It's really messed up. But it got to where I enjoyed
All of it.
I really enjoyed that. It was like when it was that boom, boom, boom and
Right.
hopping and everybody was going and it was critical. And I didn't enjoy like when things went bad, you know,
Right.
that's different. But the adrenaline part, very much,
Yeah, there's this thing of like,
very, very much.
I mean, I grew up playing cops and robbers.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that was one of my go-to games. We didn't call it cops and robbers. We called it guns. Do you want to play guns? And I would call up my friends and be like, hey,
I want to play guns.
you want to play guns? Yeah. And then I would get all my guns, just very, very similar to what our 15-year-old son does.
Yeah.
And hop on my bike and drive
Off
over to
you
their
go,
house.
yeah, see
And we
them
would
play
play
guns.
guns. And back in the day, we didn't have, I mean, Nerf was a thing back in the day, and paintball guns were a thing.
Yeah.
But all of that stuff wasn't very, like paintball guns were too expensive and Nerf guns weren't really useful.
So glad we didn't do paintball guns for Asher.
Oh my goodness, right?
The whole neighborhood would be colored.
We didn't have airsoft really back then. So you either had like BB guns that
vinyl
would hurt
fence.
and kill people or animals, or Nerf guns or paintball guns.
Yeah.
Anyways, all I had was toy guns. So it was literally like making the sound as you were shooting people. Nothing was actually being shot. It was just like,
I got you. No, you
Right.
didn't. Yes, I did.
exactly. And, but I grew up playing that.
Yeah.
And so when it came, like, fast forward 30 years to where I'm jumping fences and chasing
You were
people,
playing guns.
and do you know what I mean? Having to pull my gun out on people and all sorts of different things. It was totally like I was playing,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It's not like I took it as a playful thing at the time, but from that perspective of what was happening with the adrenaline, with the chemical dump,
Yeah.
all those kind of different things that was happening in my body, very, very similar. Very, very similar. Same thing with pursuits, right?
Yeah.
We used to play 1080,
Yeah.
even though we didn't call it that. But once we got driver's licenses, the same
Oh,
friends
did
that
you?
I would play guns with as kids, we would now just chase each other around town in our cars.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so I was very, like, from a very early age of driving, from the point of getting my driver's license, we were chasing each other at high speeds around town and down back roads and dirt roads. And like, there were times where the dirt roads that we go and take Asher, we used to, because he's got a permit now, but where we would go and take them practice driving, that's where we would go and chase each other oftentimes. And so I remember one time I was actually chasing Clint, and Clint's an old friend of mine that passed away quite a while ago, actually. I think back in maybe even 10 years ago. And he had a Camaro that he fixed up. So it was it was cool. It was a cool car. And I had my mom's Ford Escort.
Same.
Which I drove like a sports car.
Yeah,
it had an e-brake. It was
Yeah.
it was an automatic, but I learned very quickly how to use that e-brake to my
Really?
advantage.
I
Yeah.
grew up with an e-brake, and I've never used an e-brake like a badass.
Oh, yeah.
I've only been like parking.
Yeah, no, I could drive that Ford Escort like a race car. And so we would chase each other, and he'd have a car full of people and I'd have a car full of people. And we were down on this dirt road one time, and it was night, and there was so much dust and headlights and stuff that you couldn't really gauge distance. And I was too close to him.
Scary.
It's very scary. And what happened was there was a point where it was almost a 90-degree turn. It wasn't a curve, right? It was a 90-degree turn to go left. And he had to slow down enough for it. But because there was too much dust, I locked up brakes and like barely missed him and barely missed the big fence post that was, from the neighbors, not the neighbors, but the fence out there in the middle of nowhere. And like skidded to a stop as he takes off going up the dirt road. And we're all like, it's a split second of like, nobody's dead. Reverse, flip it, take off after him again.
Oh my God, that's it. Asher doesn't get his license. I'm done. I'm done. He's going to have to figure out how to work the bus system.
Yeah.
I'm too scared. I'm too scared.
No, I'll teach him.
I went fast on straightaways.
Did you?
We didn't have it's funny. I grew up in dirt roads, but I didn't hang out around there. It was always military base. It was the slow, maybe you hit 30 or 35 on a street, but the straightaway between the base and where I lived, that 10, I would.
That's a nice big flat stretch of
I would,
nothing and
I
plenty
would go
of
really, really fast.
Yeah, you
there.
could see for miles and miles and miles. So that's a good stretch to speed on.
There's some dips, and the cops, so you knew how to there's a gravel pit. Once you were past the gravel pit, you were good. But if you saw a coming up, you're like,
right.
Bring it back down. Bring it back down. I would, on the way to work, because I was always running late, there's a train of cars, right? And everybody's going the same direction because nobody's leaving if you lived on the base, it's because you worked on the base.
Yeah.
And
So
you weren't.
Stretch of cars going
so you got to
one
stretch
way.
cars going one way, which means that's, so if you got to pass, so I would just take the whole and find the spot and come over.
And then
I got told on a lot.
I was going to say everybody knew, right?
Yeah, I got told
There's
on a
15
lot.
people that work there. They all know which car you're driving.
But I was yeah, I had a nice car too. It was a fast car. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. There was no other option.
We need to go out driving. I need to teach you some stuff.
You
like the
do.
e-brake.
It's really lucky that I made it through all of this because
You're a good
I was
driver.
never taught defensive driving.
Yeah, but you're a good driver.
Thank you.
I feel very, very comfortable with you driving.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Even on our first date when the first thing I did was run a stoplight?
Yeah.
I
That was so
remember it
funny.
being a stop sign still, and you were...
Nope, it was a stoplight. It was a busy intersection. Stuff just ran right through it. I'm like, oh, that was a red light.
I made it. I cleared it.
Did we?
We didn't wreck.
Maybe it's like Beetlejuice.
Is that where we... Oh,
Maybe-
that's sad. Don't say that.
that's
I'll
just
get all
silly.
emotional. There's a couple of days before the moon. It's either anger or tears.
You take your pick.
I'll start crying.
So we have a topic actually for this episode. Somehow we got into cop talk and 1080s and dispatch and radio talk.
Well, at some point, I want to do an episode about dispatch and what it was like, because I just had I've done little snippets, but it's always this is what it is. Just I'm not going to do this one because we're going to have your thing, but I'm just bringing awareness that,
let's do it.
Oh, I haven't actually really got into a lot of things.
Baby, we're here. Let's do it.
I'm nervous right now.
That episode will wait. That topic isn't going anywhere. The thing that we were going to talk about, and we haven't even talked about it. So we're right in the midst of, I think, the episode this is supposed to be. If you're open to it,
Should I try?
if you're ready.
Well, as soon as I said that, I was like,
no time like the present.
well, fuck. Okay, I will try. I don't know if I can. Wow, I'm literally scared. That's funny. I think what I struggle with on that is I don't feel like I have, which is not accurate, but it's I feel like I don't have like as much validity or even right to like be affected because I was always in a controlled environment. What was happening, the incoming call, everything, my stress was basically communication and imagination. And yes, toxic work environment, but communication and imagination as to where officers, EMT, like their environment is, you know, even firefighters, all of that, it's never a controlled environment. It's always a chaos. Anything can happen. Anything can turn. Lives can be lost at any given moment. And so that wasn't my reality, which makes it harder to, you know, be like, oh, hey, I have some trauma here too. I want to talk about.
Is your trauma any less valid?
It's not less valid, but it is different.
Yeah, because it's a different experience.
It's different.
But what you just described, like life's on the line, all these, you know,
it's
chaos.
the same thing.
You experienced all of that.
I did. Like I'm communicate why it's hard to feel like I have the right to communicate.
Okay.
Which is
I'll do my best not to interrupt and when I feel like you're kind of minimizing your worth and value.
Yeah, because I'm definitely not. Like, this is just part of it. It's like, and that's also some of the, like, I didn't come up with that theory all on my own. You know, that's kind of how, you know, they give the, you know, you're the lifeline, because of you, they talk very nicely, but treat you a lot of times very poorly.
Like in training and stuff?
No, okay. I might not be able to. It's funny how completely, like, all the hush is coming in. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. Because, like, so much of it, I think, needs to be said.
Yeah. It's a very underappreciated and I mean, they have those TV shows, and there's been some movies and things like that about, you know, dispatch and dispatch centers and 911 operators and of course they don't get it accurate at all.
Yeah, they never get any like it's always anything that they're trying to show. This is what it's like, a day in the life of whatever is always off, whatever profession. But it was like I didn't even have, there was some traumas that I knew was affecting me in the process. But the reality is I had no idea the amount of trauma that was actually taking place and that I actually had experienced and was trying to get past until, I don't know, like it was over a year out of dispatch before it started to like really sink in and that I had awareness of it. And I think the reason of that was, and I've talked about this, is where the center that I was at, the environment, the department, and I don't believe it's unique to the department that we were at, the area that we were. It was a very, very toxic work environment. It was like, it is ridiculous. You expect, I remember thinking like, holy, like we're adults. Like this is where people call for help. How is this happening here? Like, this is where, like, you are supposed to be the most adult version of yourself,
Can
right?
you give some examples of the toxicity that you're kind of talking about?
I can, but I don't know that that's really where I want the focus.
Okay.
I want the focus on just like this is critical. I don't want to, like, it shouldn't be that way. That needs to be a supportive environment. It needs to be, everybody's traumatized there.
Yeah.
So trying to not act like that, and now realizing that, oh, everybody's acting in trauma. Because when you start out there, you're not like that. It's the ones that have been there. It's the seasoned, and from all aspects of it, is that after they've been like all this trauma, and then they're also getting now trained by trauma and by unhealthy techniques. So it's like a breeding ground. It is it's a breeding ground for chaos. And you have to now figure out how to process and handle all the things that come, which is intense. It's really, the things that happen are really, really intense in there. And they happen fast and they happen out of nowhere, and you don't, like, there's no break. There's times you're handling multiple intense situations at the same time, and then you're going to another one. And by the way, in between that, you're having people calling, yelling at you because an officer hasn't showed up for the neighbor's barking dog yet. So because of that, I didn't really have like the full process. It took a while. I was just really happy to be out of that environment, and also really scared. And then I had taken on so many duties, so many extra duties, and made myself invaluable, which burned myself out to the point too. So there's so many different things. So I didn't have full awareness. I did not have full awareness, but I did see that I was starting to get jaded too. It was starting.
How did that start to kind of manifest, you think? Or like, not necessarily what you think, but how did you start to kind of see it? What started to...
The being jaded, or...
Like you said that you did have some awareness that suddenly this job was affecting you in some way. What did that look like?
It wasn't like suddenly. It was like there were calls that I remember... Like it seemed to be like I had wonderful calls, helping deliver babies. Like that was beautiful, right? It's scary. It's like, oh my God, you got to do it right. But like beautiful things. And then I had calls. I remember the first one that was really like, it's okay if I cry. It's okay if I cry.
Yeah, baby, it is okay.
Like, you have so many things that, come through, and hearing people screaming on the other end and fighting and like making horrible threats and like panicking over what they just walked in. Like so much, it's chaos. People are calling you when like the worst moment, as well as I'm really annoyed at this barking dog. I really got bitter at people that would call about barking dogs. I got really bitter because it was always they were always so terrible, and you need to get here now and don't do anything. How many times? Like they're on a, anyways.
We have neighbors in our backyard, and over the years with the podcast, especially when we used to record it outside and stuff like that, and every now and then you can still hear them. And our neighbors in the backyard, who are very sweet.
They are very sweet.
It's this older couple. We absolutely, have a lot of love and respect for them.
Hate their dogs.
Their dogs
love
are very
dogs.
yappy and barky.
Just hate the yappy.
At the worst times.
They start 2 a.m. It's summer. They're out all night.
Yeah.
Keep us up.
And so we understand where people are coming from with the frustration
also,
of
we've never
barking
called
dogs. And we'll never call and complain to anybody about a barking dog.
Yeah. Like if it gets to that point, we'll go knock on your door.
Exactly.
Like, you got to do something because I'm going crazy.
Yeah, that's a really good recommendation. If you feel like your neighbors aren't doing anything about their dogs,
go talk to them.
Just go talk to them and say, hey, hi neighbor.
Hi.
We love your dogs, but can you muzzle them, please? Sorry, babe. Go ahead.
No, I was also like happy to go over on that. I remember taking a call, and they were out riding 4-wheelers or ATVs or whatever you want to, call them. They were out and up in a canyon, and they had a little girl on the front and ran into tree branches, just the tree branches, and it punctured her neck. And the details of it were intense. Trying to walk them through, trying to keep her alive, and she wasn't breathing, and they were
So just the back and forth of all the things that we were trying to do and the descriptions. And then she didn't make it. And it was so messed up. It was so messed up. And that it really, like, it sat. And I remember like choking back my stuff because I'm like, because other calls are happening. Everything else is happening. You don't have time to, like, you can't, if you walk out, calls don't get answered. Officers don't get answered. You have to keep going. And if there's enough people in there where you can walk out, then you get to take a minute. But that never happens, you know? And then they just kept coming. And I got another one where the dad was out with his son writing, and just hearing the way his dad was talking to him. And it was like, I can't hear, like I still hear, like, it's hard. It doesn't like go away. You know, it just doesn't go away. You hear the way the parent is trying to support their kid, and just like, it doesn't go away. And those ones, like, it made it to where I don't want our kids to have four-wheelers. I was pretty against that, and trying to, like, when we finally agreed to let them have it, it's been hard. And I still have to, like, check. I'm not okay because it's so hard. So I knew those bothered me. You know, I knew there was these calls there. And, like, I only broke down on one. And it was a baby. All I can, like, the sound on that is the mom screaming and just screaming. And that one, that was the one that on the floor. Then I started, like, that was the one that I broke down and had to, like, pull it back, because you only get a second, right? If that happens and you actually crack, you only get a second. But that's the one I came home and I talked to you about that one. And I remember just, like, on the bed, just crying, and you holding me. But, like, those, they don't go away. They don't go away. And they just keep happening. Like, it's not like those are the rare calls. They just keep happening. They just keep happening. They just keep coming in. They just keep coming in. And it's accidents horrific accidents, and they're describing and trying to get to. There's spouses that are trying to, you know, do CPR on the love of their life. There's so many. And then there's the next where they're trying to kill the other person, you know, and then threatening to kill them, and just got assaulted, and then trying to calm situations so it doesn't turn. Like, it is always, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And you're left with, you know, sometimes they would come in and give you updates on what happened. I remember there was a really bad accident, and they were calling in debris on the road, because that's all they found was debris, just like cars passing by debris. And one person stopped, and he's like, I think there's an accident. Like, there's debris. I can't see anything, but it doesn't, like, there's parts of a car. And it was in the middle of the night out on I-80. And so I was like, okay, I want you to, like, when cars pass by, just try and get quiet and see if you can hear anything. See if you can hear any, like, sounds, like how a hot engine sounds. If you can hear, because any voices, just trying to, like, hear where their parts might be. And he's like, he could hear, like, kind of like a little hiss, like how you would hear the heat. And so we started walking towards that, and he found a little girl lying. So the entire car, she's the only one that survived, but the entire car full of people, like, all of these things. And maybe I'm getting too much here. It's just like all of these things that, and then you just keep going. You keep going. We got the officer came in and would give us updates on her, because he responded and just, like, was there with her. And when she got transported, he would go to the hospital and check on her because she lost her mom. So he would go check on her, and he would come back in and talk to our crew that worked it and let us know how she was doing, how she was recovering. And that was amazing. But usually you don't get that. So you're left with your imagination. And one of the tips they tell you is to try and like reframe the call. How do you want the call to go? So then the call happens, and then you get off, and when you're processing, because you don't know and you don't get that closure, create it the way you want it to go. So how does it go? How do you want that call to go? What's the happy ending? So you can try and program your brain that that's what's happening. By the way, that doesn't work. It's really hard. It's really hard, but it's something, right? It's something. You try to give something. So you have all of this like heartbreak on top of all the other calls that are coming in, and just a VIN inspection and a fender bender, and people upset because, you know, their car is now dented, and just everything that happens, gel transfers, all the things that aren't catastrophic that need to take place are happening at the same time. That are all happening at once. Everything's coming in. You've always got the phone ringing. You got somebody there. You've got people on the radio coming in. There are a screen full of calls. There's also downtimes. You know, there's also times when it's like nothing happens. But what is really fucked up about that is that is the worst.
Yeah. Try to deregulate your nervous system during a downtime.
Yeah, you can't.
Good luck.
And then you start to like that craving chaos, like want something to happen, want it to get busy. You don't want anybody to die. You don't want anybody to be hurt. But the traffic pursuits, the things that can get busy, get adrenaline going to try and...
You become addicted to it.
You do. You need that. It's like, and then you're just spiraling out. And then you start treating your coworkers like shit. You are treating when you're training people and they don't have the level that you're at, you're treating them like shit, and it turns into like catty. Like they were catty. It was really intense. It was cliques, crews, who was going to, like, are you in this group? Are you not? Like, who's been shunned, who hasn't? Any guys that came in, woo. Guys had a hard time in there. Those women pushed men out.
Yeah.
It was...
Very few men worked in that center.
Or like, it was such a terrible environment because you had trauma, breeding trauma, teaching trauma, training trauma, living trauma, all of it.
Bunch of trauma addicts.
And then it's, like, get help. You know, right. I've got to say, my lieutenant, like I wish she could have done more. She didn't have, like, coming up against, you know, sheriffs, and she didn't have, like, they were the say. She had to do their bidding, like chain of command. That's where it was at. But she had a good heart. And she never lost her heart. And she was very loving. And she was very loving to me. I had a complete breakdown towards the end of my career in her office. And I got love, I got support, and I got help. And it stayed right there. Like, that doesn't happen. She's rare on that. Now, there's a lot of other situations that I wish she would have been able to handle and take care of, so people weren't getting burnt out to the point of just fucked. There was behaviors that needed more than, like, they would get just like these little reprimandations, and then they wouldn't do anything about, because it was so scarce to have good employees. So if you knew your job, you could be abusive, because it was more critical to have somebody that knew the job than it was to, like, keep that environment healthy, because then you have new people coming in and training, and it takes so long to train somebody. And then once they're off training, to get them off of probation and get them to where the level that they're actually holding their own and do it's
It's like a year.
Yeah, it is a long process. So if you have somebody that is pulling all of this weight and is really good at their job, but fucking people up in there, like emotionally, they stay because it's too big of a wave to pull them out.
Mm-hmm.
So they get job security. They don't, it's so sick that that's how it is. It's really sad. But I feel like she did the best she could with what she had. Things needed to be shifted. Like, I think it would have took one to say, this is how you're going to treat people, you're out. And then that would have sent a message instead of sending the message that you can show up however you want. All you have to do is show up and do your job. Treat people however you want.
Yeah.
Like, there was no ramifications. So other than silly write-ups. Was
there any conversation? Because I apologize. I don't know if I know this or not, babe.
Gosh. Bring it back to reality, huh?
No, you're fine. Because that is reality, Steph.
Yeah.
That's
what they face.
Real truth of not just what they faced, what you lived through.
I did live through that, and I'm out. But
Right.
There are people there. Like, that's their life.
That's the reality of what that entire field of law enforcement deals with.
Yeah.
From every end of the spectrum. And was it only training through, like, on the job training there, or did you ever go somewhere? There's not like a dispatch academy or a 2-week course.
We went to post.
Did you go to post?
We had a week in post, and which obviously it's different then. And yeah, we went all over for training. There's like EMD, like emergency medical dispatch, emergency fire dispatch. And so there are other places.
Okay.
And there's other places that host it. But like, we were at post, there's priority dispatch. We would do it right at the academy. There were some trainings that would happen at other centers, but it's not like you were on the floor with them.
Okay.
It was pulled out into another
in the
room.
training facility or training room or whatever.
Yeah.
Throughout all of that training process, how long was that before you kind of were on the floor in the center itself working?
Oh.
Or is it all just in conjunction with?
It's in conjunction. Day one, you're on the floor.
Okay.
Day one, you're on the floor listening to phone calls. Day two, you're starting to answer admin calls or
And then,
like non-emergency calls.
At what point throughout that whole process was there ever any conversations in a real, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but I think it still needs to be asked and heard as well. Was there any legitimate training or conversation or understanding of the mental health aspects of this job and what to expect in a realistic way, and also what to do in response to this immense amount of trauma that you're going to be under?
I only within the last couple months, I got rid of my training manual. And I wish that I could like show that. The manual was huge. It was just the training manual was huge. And then you had like different binders for like different kind of trainings. But the dispatch itself was like one of those big, I don't know, 3-4 inch binders. And it was full. And the training on that mental health was it was such a small, itty bitty little section in the back that they basically just roll over as checking this off the list.
Right.
It was, and it was like, pay attention nearby. If you need help, if you're having these thoughts, reach out. We're here to help. Like, make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure that you're eating healthy foods. Make sure that you're exercising. This is what you do.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was just like, it was bullshit. That was it.
How do you think, and I think this is a really important topic, babe, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, and I'm glad that you're kind of at a point in your life where you're able to process this and share this on the podcast, because it is such a, it's like a sad reality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's this system in place that society doesn't understand and truthfully takes for granted. And it is so important. Like, if we don't have the capacity to dial 911 in an emergency, then what? Right? What do you do? There used to be a time when 911 isn't something that's been around forever.
Yeah.
Right? What what do you do if that emergency response system isn't in place? People don't realize, like, turns out you're on your own, right? It's the accident that happens in the middle of nowhere where there's no cell reception and the next car isn't coming for the next 3 hours. What do you do?
That happens, like, what do you do? And like that happens now with the understaffing that they have.
Exactly.
There were times, and it sucked when every channel was lit up, every channel was going. The lines, we ran out of lines.
Yeah, you call 911 and you're put on hold.
Not only you're put on hold, but then there's times that you get busy. You
Nobody
don't get to
answers.
get through. Like, there's only so many phone slots that they have where you are on hold. Every line is busy. Like, there are times with it, like experiencing that right now, where you call 911 and you cannot get through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's an important thing for people to really realize, as well as like the firsthand experience of what you went through, because people just don't know. They just don't have a real understanding. I mean, it's the same. We talk about this stuff all the time, not all this law enforcement stuff and dispatch stuff, but we just don't know what other people are experiencing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't really understand. And it's so hard to put yourself in their shoes, and it's so hard to put yourself in their position because you can't gather the data to really form the imagination of what it's actually like. So it's important for you to share in the way that you're sharing right now. What are some of the, from your thought process now and your processing now and everything that we've gone through now, because it's been, when did you leave? 2017?
Yeah.
It was the beginning of 2017. So 5 years ago, you've been out for 5 years.
I'm ready to talk about it.
High five. That's how long it takes,
Yeah.
right? Truthfully, I think it takes years and years and years to process the trauma and even get to the point where you can start talking about the trauma. What are some of the ramifications that you feel in our life and in your life and in your own body that stemmed from all of it? I know there's lots, but some things that stand out.
I think some things are how jaded I got on things. Like, I'm very much like I'm reconnecting to my heart, but I think I got really like jaded, like kind of like my heart checked out of things in our life where I needed to show up as me, as mom, as partner, and I showed up as this is fine, like, or not really hearing what the other person was saying and just going into, no, this is what you're going to do. Cause that's another, you take control of the call. You don't let them control the call, because it's, you have to learn how to take control of the chaos, take control of the call to calm situations down and diffuse. So instead of like showing up heart, I showed up taking control of things. You're smiling at me. You're like, oh, I know.
No. Only, I mean, it's so similar, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. I respond to a scene, and if I let them control what's taking place, it just creates more chaos. So it's the same thing, right? You have to take control over the phone, and then the officer gets there and takes over that control. So then you can go on to the next thing.
And so the dynamic, like I would try and control, still work with that, trying to control scenes essentially, and to like turning scenes over to you as well. Kind of like that whole dynamic. But if I don't feel like you're handling it, then like I'm taking control of it. And
that's such a funny, I have never thought about that dynamic playing out in our everyday life, in our relationship, in our like raising kids together, from that perspective of we both have that, because it's a skill set on one, right, high road skill set of high activation in law enforcement, you know, that lifestyle and that work, it's needed. And then how funny is it to think that we would do the same thing? And I'm kind of running some scenarios in my head and experiences in our head where we would very much do that same thing, where suddenly we're taking control of an experience in our everyday life and passing it off to each other in some way, right? That's funny.
Passing it off or taking it back if it's not handled the way we think it should be handled. Also, I struggled.
probably still do, but I think I'm doing much better with that. The same thing with downtime. Like when things were calm, I didn't do well on the calm. And I would find something to like speed it up. It took me a while to like just even have an awareness of it here, of like how I still struggle in calm at times. I'm definitely doing better. And I sit in calmness, and there's times I demand calmness. I demand seclusion. I demand like relaxing, bath, staying. And then there's times it's like we are taking this and we are stirring it up. I need like that speed of it. That
chemical dump.
That chemical dump. And, you know, I also have massive amounts of, I didn't go in to working like in the law enforcement agency with no trauma. So it's not like I had 5 years. You know, that's another thing is I went in, I worked hard, I promoted hard, burned out fast, and got out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I was like, this is not going to happen. But I knew how to thrive in chaos and trauma. So when I got there, I knew how to thrive in chaos and trauma. And I also knew how to accept abuse and really shitty behavior.
Man.
So I was perfect. I could go in.
That's why
I was so calibrated to a fucked up environment that I could thrive.
That's why we were so good at our jobs.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people in that field, in that first responder, law enforcement kind of field, come from a lot of trauma. I bet the best ones, like the ones that really excel, are the ones that come from backgrounds like ours.
Probably.
That would make a lot of sense.
Probably.
I was thinking actually this morning, this is funny that we're talking about this today.
And then think about the ones that don't, that are new to that kind of trauma, how they respond to these intense situations, which are valid responses,
right?
But how they're treated.
Yeah.
When they have a healthy response to this shit and they're not like, oh, this is fine, like keep going. When they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
They're minimized and ridiculed and like dismissed, and like they're cut down.
Yeah.
They're weak. They're it's just treated because you have to.
I trained officers to, because I would see it, right? We'd show up on something and they would freeze. Mm-hmm. And I would have to, sometimes I would show up on something that they were like their call or their traffic stop, and they were kind of frozen and they weren't really doing what needed to be done. And I would take over the call or take over the traffic stop and direct them what to do and tell them what to do. And then afterwards it would be, I was definitely harsh at times, but I thought I was coming from this place of like, dude, this is the reality.
They're going to get killed if they don't. You got to be.
I'm trying to save your life right now. You need to not do that again. And here's why. And so you have to like but you have to force that natural human response to chaos and trauma. You have to stamp that down.
Yeah.
In order to survive this experience.
It's the same in dispatch. Like if you have those emotions and you can't hold it together, you're not going to be able to respond. You're going to cost somebody their life.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to act. It's going to be your fault. You're going to cost an officer their life. You're not going to be able to help the person that's bleeding out. You're going to cost lives. So you have to, again, it's like you aren't going to be killed, but you are going to be the reason that other people do not make it. So are you going to tap into your emotions, or are you going to save a life? Dispatch officers, all of that need more support. There's when I was in there was an administration change. We changed sheriffs. And I was really excited for the old sheriff. I don't know now, right? I was good with the old sheriff, but I don't know now, right? Because you learn more. He retired, though. It wasn't like he lost the election. He retired. And then the one that came in, I don't even remember who he was running against.
I was so excited. I knew he was going to be a good sheriff. So I'll just speak to one personal experience.
Yeah.
Dispatch is treated like shit. And in order, because of that toxic environment, which, by the way, toxic environment also involved the jail, officers out on the road. It was a toxic department. Community. It wasn't just this department, but I can speak, so because dispatch is so, worthless and lazy, so the downtime, what they decided to do was to install cameras and microphones. So we were constantly being monitored, and we were not allowed to have any downtime.
Oh my goodness.
And in the event that they saw us not actively working on something, we weren't justifying our jobs, and they were going to cut a position. Like, that's how.
I remember when that took
Yeah.
place.
It was just.
One of the things that I was really,
That's just one thing.
yeah, right. Because of our relationship and because of, not just knowing you, but because of our relationship and everything, one of the things that I made a really big point on was expressing anytime, especially new officers would start complaining about dispatch or, coming back to the office and somebody, I just did everything that I could to be like, hey, they are doing a way harder job than we're doing. Like, you really need to, appreciate all these different things and learn how to work with them, as opposed to thinking that they're just there for your needs only, right? The idea that you're just going to sit there and command everything. And if they don't give it to you in the next second that you want it, that's not, that's your problem and your behavior and your action, not theirs. And it was really important to me to try to train new officers on the realities of what you guys experienced. And I kept advocating at the department to send new officers, because you remember how they used to come and sit for like 10 minutes or something. Like, I wanted new officers to have like at least a minimum of a day, if not, like, I think
they should spend a week with us.
I do too. I really do. I think a week.
And they should take turns with the day and night, because it's different beasts, just like it's out when you're on the road. It's
and the
beasts.
same thing with dispatchers, right?
Instead of the 4 hours.
Yeah.
We get 4 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think that was a really missed opportunity to cultivate not just a better working relationship, but it's like, how do you fine tune this machine that's in operation here? You have to understand all the working parts. And if you don't understand what dispatch is doing, and if dispatch doesn't understand, do you know what I mean? The new dispatchers that don't recognize even just what goes into a 1060, right? Into a traffic stop, don't understand what a traffic stop actually is, then they don't really have an appreciation for what their responsibility in that traffic stop is, right? All of those things are important. I mean, we're kind of not spiraling out, but
I don't know. I think that's very important.
I do too, but
I think that is very important. And also, like, how you treat back and forth, like, to tell you dispatchers, they treat no, they have favorites.
Oh yeah.
They absolutely have favorites. There is, like, depending on how you treat them, depending on how you it goes a long way. I would like to say that, like, obviously you're in a crunch. We're not going to not answer. There's not that, but there's never a punishment of now you don't get your call. Like, it's not that shit.
It is that shit sometimes.
Just not answering a call, you think?
I know it is.
Okay, probably.
It is
that shit didn't happen on mine, but
no, because you're you, right? And you were good.
Yeah, you said also there's dispatchers that didn't clear channels.
There was all sorts of stuff.
So there's like all kinds of.
Nobody's perfect.
But then also, maybe it wasn't an option. Maybe there was one of them in there at the time because there was two on duty and one was pooping.
Yeah.
And so there was one dispatcher and they legitimately couldn't.
Exactly.
Could have been that.
There's lots of those things. And like you said, it's a toxic environment and people are wounded, hurt, damaged, broken, trauma addicts, trying to do an impossible job in an impossible environment.
Everybody starts drinking in there. not on the job, but like,
Some of them.
well, probably.
Not
yeah,
probably.
Probably.
If you think about it, you know who they are.
The drink on the, well, I'm thinking of the dispatch that I knew. There was one that I was second. And came in,
You could smell it.
drank all night the night before, and was there and I was like, it doesn't look like you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, he didn't feel good. I'm like, I think you should go home. We got this.
Yeah.
But what did I not do there?
Exactly.
Was he hungover or was he still
Drunk.
I don't know. But it was just like, that
Yeah.
should have probably been something that I said, but what? I don't know. Like, I can look at that now. What I did was controlled the environment
Yeah.
even at that point.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of it, right? The trauma that first responders, law enforcement, dispatch, like the trauma that exists in that career field is so toxic and detrimental to the person and to the individual that it's not a matter of, I mean, I can safely say this, I believe, without exception, that you cannot go into that job for longer than a year, right? If you were only there for a year, maybe you can walk out unscathed. But if you're there for longer than a year, you have trauma that needs to
Yeah.
be addressed. And if you don't address it, then you're going to use coping mechanisms to survive it. That's just human nature, right?
Yeah.
We all know that. Everybody's coping mechanisms are different. But the reality is that all the coping mechanisms that we use in everyday life in order to survive, right? Drugs, alcohol, sex, food, gambling, addictions, all of these coping mechanisms are brought into that environment as well. And they are used to cope and manage and move through and survive that environment. And that is not just sad, it's dangerous. It's also like, that's the other thing people don't think, right? Out here in the public land of naivety and thinking that everything, you call the 911 or like everybody thinks the officer that responds is the Navy SEAL that is super squared away and able to operate at a high level and all these kind of different things.
There's really cops at every corner. They're all available all the time.
Right. All of those different things. And then if you think you're calling into the 911 dispatch center, that it's some high-tech, futuristic, there's a team of 60
of like
people. Yeah.
Like ready to go.
You don't really understand the reality of it. And nobody wants to really acknowledge and recognize that the person that you're speaking to or dealing with is coping with their trauma in so many different ways in order to just simply survive.
Yeah.
So they're not really actually at their full capacity and their full potential 90% of the time because of all the things that they're doing to just simply try to survive and live. So that's a massive issue as well. And also that doesn't, the field that we're talking about is just the microcosm example of obviously community and society as a whole, right? Because society as a whole is doing the exact same thing. So the idea that when you go to the grocery store and you're dealing with the person in front of you, they have coping mechanisms that they are actively implementing consciously and subconsciously in order to survive. The person in traffic, the bank store, the bank teller, your kid's teacher at school, all of these things. We like to think that everybody is somehow not doing these things.
Yep.
And
just fresh and ready to go.
Right.
Everything's fine.
And that especially in these professional fields that we really don't understand and that we take for granted, it's hard for us to even then imagine
that they're human.
Right. The doctors that are taking care of us in hospitals, the airline pilots that are flying us around the country, all of these things we can't, like, it's really hard for us to think, like, you leave that shit at home, you don't bring that stuff to work is the mentality that we all have.
And leave work at work and you don't bring it home.
Yeah. And it's
that's how
just
it
so
works.
silly when you think about it from the perspective of trauma, because it's like there's literally no way to do that. And all of the coping mechanisms, all the unhealthiness, all of the dysregulation, all of this chaos is in everything at all times, right? You and I both know from our personal experiences in that field that we had so many unhealthy coping mechanisms. And it's not like we just left them at home. I didn't put on my uniform and get my vest on and strap on my belt, and suddenly I didn't have all of my dysregulation, and I didn't have all of my anxiety and trauma and PTSD, and not to mention the suppressed shadow trauma from childhood that I wasn't even aware of. All of these factors still played a role every time I stopped a car, every time I knocked on somebody's door, every time I responded to the scene of an accident, every time I just showed up to take your report about your credit card fraud, right? And you had the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, it all comes back to, for me, this whole concept and idea of what can we shift and change in regards to the mental health consciousness in this world and in this society, and how important it is to really not like take an honest assessment of yourself, but then recognize the realities that exist everywhere, that we are all suffering from trauma. And if you think you aren't, I think you're just head in the sand, and right?
Yeah.
Not everybody has the full spectrum, and it's all just this beautiful cycle of trauma and patterns and everything, but we're all on it. And we all have really unhealthy ways of dealing and coping with it, because that's just what we were shown and taught.
Yeah.
Literally in law enforcement and in dispatch, right? It's like, hey, you got to stop doing that. Shove that down. Was that a hard call for you? Sorry, suck it up. You got to answer the next one.
Yeah. And then that learning how to like really find humor
Oh my gosh.
in terrible situations, because you couldn't cry. So what did you figure out how to do?
Laugh.
You figured out how to laugh
And at the expense of maybe
and
that's,
it wasn't because you that it's still, that's like it's a release. You figured out how to get a release.
that goes into what we've been talking about lately, like with the Oscars and stuff, and everybody making fun of trauma, making fun of other people as the coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
And that's the mask of covering up what you're feeling underneath and all the pain and sadness. And yeah, I think comedy, laughter, joking is important. Laughter is necessary, right? But it also is a incredibly detrimental and dangerous, unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with repressed sadness, pain, trauma, and hurt. And when it's used in that really unhealthy way, it dehumanizes.
Yeah.
And that's the only way. I shouldn't say the only way. That was the way that we were taught and shown in law enforcement and in dispatch, right?
And those are the tough ones. Those are the strong ones. It was revered as an accomplishment.
Exactly.
And a strength. It was like, this is a goal.
Could go through those incredibly worst case scenarios and then immediately respond to the next one.
Yeah. Only the really special ones can do that.
Yeah, the best of the best.
Yeah.
The ones that get promoted.
Right? It's like that. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. You should probably cry.
Right?
Yeah.
You can laugh a little bit, but then let those tears come.
Yeah, it's not, there's plenty to laugh at. There's plenty to laugh about.
I cried a couple of times on duty. And I'm trying to think of actually how many times. Maybe only 2 times that I can really think of. And there were many, 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 many more times that I wanted to cry.
Yeah. You fought it back.
I could, I mean,
or
you could,
not even fought. You can just feel.
You could feel it. I remember doing CPR on a baby. And gratefully, I didn't have to do that often. And I remember doing CPR on this little baby. It was, probably not even a year old. He was a little boy. And by the time we got there and by the time we started working on him, it was pretty obvious that he wasn't going to make it. I think he was still breathing. Well, if we're doing CPR, he's not breathing, but like there was still a little bit of vitals and stuff like that. And so we were trying to do CPR, but this little boy had some medical issues already, and he was really, really fragile. And part of the things, like when they never portray CPR accurately in anything that I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
In any TV show or movie, I've never seen it accurately portrayed. And I didn't know either. I remember the first time I did CPR on an adult, I was doing what I thought I was doing, how I had been trained, and I thought that I was doing it appropriately. And when the paramedics arrived, it may have even been Corey.
Yeah.
Now that I think of it, because he was Corey's been on the podcast a bunch, and when paramedics arrived and started, like they showed up, and when they show up, you then just become their support, right? And they take over, and I'm just there helping you with whatever you need. And he took over CPR. I don't know if it was Corey, but they took over CPR, and immediately I realized I had been doing it wrong.
Wow.
Because I wasn't doing it fast enough, and I wasn't doing it hard enough. And they started doing it, and immediately you start hearing everything crack and pop and ribs break.
Yeah.
And it's faster than you think it is. And he started pumping and started doing CPR. And it was like, to do CPR in a way that's going to save somebody's life, it's hard. It's not easy. It takes a lot. And that's why it's really important to have two people or even more people, because to pump that hard and as long as you need to pump in order to keep blood flowing through somebody, it's a lot. And as soon as I saw that, and then he, we would take turns, and it was always like faster, you got to go faster. And so after that, I knew how to do CPR. But that's really hard to do on a baby.
I can't even imagine.
And it's a lot different when you do it on a baby. But yeah, I remember in that experience wanting to cry. I just remember having all of that stuff come up inside of me and feeling it come up inside of me. In the process of doing what we were doing, it was me and another officer that were trying to save this baby before paramedics arrived. And in the midst of doing all of it, you can't stop and cry because you have to keep going, right? And then it's like you've talked about, right? You don't even have the time to do it after because you have to go on to the next thing. And I just think that it's not only in an ideal world, but I think if we want to move forward in a place of health and true, helping people, right? Not just in a healthy way, but in really helping people, we have to consider what the people in these career fields truthfully need. And then we also have to consider what society truthfully needs. And so, as you were talking earlier about dispatch, I was picturing the perfect dispatch center.
Yeah.
And at a minimum, there's 100 people. And you have new people and trainees and just people that actually specialize. Because there's people that are really good at critical calls and critical incidences. And then there's people that aren't. And that isn't a judgment or a lack. It's just being honest with yourself and being honest with the individual, right? And you'd have people that specialized in non-critical calls, administrative calls, barking dog calls, those type of calls, and that would be a whole infrastructure, and that's where you would start, and you'd get really good at that. And then if you were the type of person that excelled in critical incidences, then you would be able to then cross-train into that area of dispatch. And that area of dispatch, all of it would have massive support. But when it came to critical incidences, 911 calls, kind of some of the worst case scenario stuff that we've been talking about that really impacts and affects, even though the entire experience has an impact and effect. But if you really wanted to be in that area of the dispatch center, it came in conjunction with copious amounts of mental health. And it was something like you had therapy every week that was not just like, it wasn't a mandate. It wasn't a forced to go to therapy. The therapists, and there would be multiple therapists that worked in the dispatch center. So you would literally work hand in hand with your therapist. And after a critical call, it wasn't, hey, are you okay? Can you go on to the next one? You were done. Your shift just ended that day.
I'm
and your shift would be like 4 hours. And then before you went home, you would immediately go sit with your therapist. And you would process and feel and experience and talk about and heal from the call that you just took.
Yeah.
Right?
That'd be something, wouldn't it?
That would be amazing.
That'd be something.
That would be a real honest and true way to help people.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be a better dispatcher. You're going to be a better person. You're going to be more capable of doing your job. You're going to show up for the people that are calling in a better way. Right? And it would just be the truth of the matter. You're not supposed to experience, like humans, there's a part of the reason why we have moved from the fight or flight existence as a species, right? It's all been this progression to move towards safety and comfort because of how toxic it is to live in a fight or flight experience. It's dangerous to be out in the Serengeti and panicked about lions attacking you in the middle of the night. So eventually you work your way into communities of safety and homes and structures and caves and huts and everything like that to survive and keep yourself safe and warm and fed. And working in a traumatic field, working in a field where you are experiencing trauma every single day at really, really high levels is literally like being back into the fight or flight experience all the time. We're not supposed to anymore. We have evolved out of it for a reason. And the idea that we're just accepting the fact that people can do that, yeah, you can, but we're not supposed to. It's not healthy. Yeah. It's a going back in time in our evolution to where we were in a fight or flight trying to survive. And so let's start looking at it from that perspective and treating it as that environment that it truly is, instead of pretending like you're weak if you can't live in that environment, right? Or you're failing, or you're not successful, or if you want to go work this job. And that's the other thing, because you're not making a lot of money, right? We'd like to think that, I mean, everybody's underpaid across the board in all these fields that are so important. Teachers, hospitals, doctors, nurses, cops, dispatchers. The things that we rely upon for society. But that would be the way to do it, I think.
Yeah. I like it.
What else, babe? Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I'm thinking about the call that you had said, the baby.
Mm-hmm.
We worked that call together. I took the call and we talked about it after.
Yeah.
And it's just like all of those different, like what, just from the get-go.
That baby didn't survive either.
I know. Like from the get-go of like that support, like, yes, dispatch, as you would have said, and the same with you. Then you did that call. You just did CPR on a baby. Like I did it over the phone, imagination, trying to work a mom through it.
Yeah.
And you showed up and held him in your arms. That's where it stops. That's where it's like, whew, now we need. But, and any of them listening to this, I can already hear it.
Because we said it, right? Uh-huh. What she's talking about is like, if you're a cop, or if you're a 911 operator, if you work in a dispatch center, and because obviously we still have friends and people that we love and care about that work in these fields. And if you're listening to this podcast and you start running through all of those judgments and all of those narratives and all of the ways that you have insulated and protected yourself by saying all of these things, especially about, for example, Stephanie and I, if you know us and you used to work right next to us and you're judging us now for what we're saying,
for being out and saying this,
right? And thinking that somehow, well, that's why you didn't make it. That's why you quit. That's why you got fired. Stephanie didn't get fired. Stephanie left of her own volition. And if you're saying
Yeah.
all of those things to
Yeah, that's
yourself
why I
right
quit.
now, right? Really ask yourself if what we're talking about isn't true.
Yeah. It's okay.
Like if you really honestly take an assessment of your shift that you're on right now or the call that you had last week,
Mm-hmm.
and if you truly believe that you are unscathed from that experience,
Yeah. That's okay.
it is okay.
That's okay. You get
We
to
see you,
Yeah, I
we care
see
about you, and we'll actually help you.
Yeah.
We're
It's
here
okay.
for you. Yeah, it is okay.
There's one more thing I wanted to this Dan Sun Photos. Am I
Yeah,
saying
what's
that right?
that guy's name?
I don't know.
He was on the podcast. He's a super cool dude.
Yes. Have you seen the new thing? His new I'll let you describe. Like he does this this artwork that is talking about it shows, it gives you a visual of the traumatic weight that is being carried of what happened. It's like these calls that shred your insides. Like he finds a way, he paints them, and he's like showing the responder and what they're feeling, and like I'm gonna get emotional. It's just beautiful. And like, yeah, go back and listen to his episode and check out his work. One of the things that like I almost responded on and I couldn't, but it brought like all of this, like this is what we need to look at in me. Like I've got like all of my cells started like vibrating and firing. He's talking about the toxic environments of law enforcement and how it's contributing to the death of officers, of responders, of dispatchers, and saying when they have not had the support and this is their environment and they commit suicide, which is so common, that now they're going to start to hold departments accountable. Because what do? You squish it down, you punish it, and you fire it. And then people are taking their lives. And now they're saying, no, this is a situation. This is a trauma environment. You did not hold up your end. You did not protect them. And you contributed to the trauma that they were experiencing. Like you are an active role in starting to hold departments accountable and trying to find a way to do that. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
It needs to happen.
It needs to happen.
Because there is a lot of, like you said, I mean, it's so rampant in the field where people are committing suicide because it's always chicken or egg, right? Well, it's not because of the job. They had all of this shit beforehand, or they were mentally ill beforehand. Or
The deputy that committed suicide at the county, it was because he was having marital problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. No, it wasn't. Was he having marital problems? Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy's name is Daniel Sundahl. He was on episode 96 of the podcast. You can go back and find that and listen to that. It's a really, really good episode. And his website is dansunphotos.com. That is dansunphotos.com. dansunphotos.com. Super impactful, powerful photos, art that he creates. And he's also, I mean, he does a lot of work in the field. We follow him on social, and it was a really good episode back in the day. And he does a lot of work to bring awareness to, like you said, the realities. He comes from that first responder field. I think he was a paramedic, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So it's really,
Did
really...
he write a book too, or am I mistaken?
I don't think he's written a book,
I'm
but he's got a
mistaken.
ton of work. Beautiful, beautiful images that are really powerful, and they're accurate.
Yeah.
They're super accurate of what it actually feels like to be in those career fields and in those jobs doing that work. And I mean, we probably should do more of these episodes. And it's just been it's been hard for us.
Yeah.
Truthfully, this has been a healing process of going through the jobs that we had, right? Our past lives. We've talked before about when we met and when we got married, right? We met and we were both in this field, and we were incredibly good at what we did. We were both really high level in these fields because turns out we had a lot of trauma in childhood and felt very comfortable in chaos and could thrive in chaos. And then we got married, and that changed everything.
Yeah.
But it didn't heal the ramifications of all of the trauma that we both experienced. And that's what we've been doing over the last few years. And it's funny because it's coming up more and more, right? We're thinking about it more. We're talking about it more in our regular everyday life. Sometimes we'll get stuck in these fun conversations where we're kind of laughing about the good old days in some regards. And it's just part of our healing process, I think, because we're finally at a place where we're healing that trauma. So it'll be something that we probably talk about more on the podcast, and then we'll come up more because of, to say that it fucked us both up is an understatement.
Yeah.
And we have shared a couple of the calls that affected us. And there are some calls that we aren't talking about and that we aren't sharing because of the impact that they still have. There's a reverence for some of the experiences that I had because of how, I mean, to say that they're traumatic, it's almost like there is some other word that doesn't exist to describe some experiences that we've gone through. Because it's not trauma. You know, it's like it's a wound to your soul.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference than just the day-to-day trauma. And those ones are a little bit rarer, but they're still frequent. And they happen on a regular basis. It's just who's going to take that call, who's answering the 911 call, and who's showing up on scene. Because there are some that just really, wound your soul. And I don't think you're supposed to, when I say heal from those, it's like, I mean, that changed my life. There's some that just changed my life and changed who I am, period. Altered my DNA in a sense. I'll never, there are some experiences that changed me irreparably where I was a different person after that, and I would never go back to the person that I was before that call. And there's a couple of them. And I know you have some. So, yeah, be nice to everybody, not just the 911 operator, or the dispatcher, or the cop, or the paramedic, or the firefighter, or the truth of the matter is we all have these things in everyday life. And we just have to start loving and having so much more compassion for the human experience that is. Because it's a rough one. All good?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay-ish. We'll be all right. Let's go eat some of that banana bread you made. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode.